I answered a hotel phone, and something answered me back from a room that didn't exist. I took the job at Brackenmere House because I needed money quickly, and because, on paper at least, it sounded easy enough. Night porter, 3 nights on, 2 off, temporary winter cover. The kind of thing you tell yourself will be miserable but manageable. A few late check-ins, a bit of hoovering in the lounge if it's quiet, maybe carry a suitcase for some elderly couple from Leeds, then spend the rest of the night half awake behind reception listening to the boiler complain through the walls. That was how it had been sold to me anyway. What I didn't expect was Whitby in January, or the hotel itself. If you've never been there off-season, it's hard to explain properly. Seaside towns in summer can be cheerful in a rough sort of way, but in winter, they feel like somewhere everyone has stepped out of in a hurry and forgotten to come back to. I got off the coach just after 6:30 with one hold-all, a coat that wasn't thick enough for the wind coming in off the sea, and that stupid sort of optimism you have when you're skint and trying to pretend you're not worried. The front was nearly empty. A few gulls. The odd dog walker bent against the cold. The amusement arcades all shut up, their lights off, metal shutters pulled down like eyelids. There was mist coming in low over the harbor, and the whole place smelled of salt, wet stone, and old chip fat. Brackenmere House sat a bit back from the front on a sloping road. All black iron railings and stained bay windows, like a place that had once been grand enough for people to arrive in gloves and hats, and now mostly survived on coach breaks and online discounts. It was bigger than I expected, 5 floors if you counted the attic rooms, with a narrow side alley leading to a tradesman's entrance and bins chained shut against the wind. One of the lamps outside the front doors was flickering when I arrived. Not dramatically, just enough to make it look like the light couldn't quite decide if it wanted to stay on. I honestly thought, standing there with my bag, that it looked less like a hotel and more like the sort of building people in town had learned to walk past without looking up. Inside, it was warm but not properly warm. More the kind of heat old buildings trap in patches, where one part of a corridor feels stuffy and the next feels like someone has opened a freezer door. The lobby had too much furniture in it. Heavy chairs, dark floral carpet, framed prints of ships and cliffs, a brass luggage trolley that looked older than me. It all would have been charming in daylight, probably. At that time of evening, with no music playing and only one lamp on behind the desk, it felt wrong. Too still. Even my footsteps sounded like I shouldn't have been making them. The manager, Maureen Pike, came out from a side office before I'd even finished taking my gloves off. Mid-50s maybe, sharp-fringed bob, glasses on a chain, the sort of expression that makes you feel you've already disappointed her before you've opened your mouth. She didn't say hello first, just looked at the clock on the wall behind me and said, "You're not late," which is a pleasant change. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. She didn't. "Sorry," I said, which is what I always say when I'm not sure what else is wanted from me. "Coach got in early." "Well," she said, taking the envelope with my references out of my hand without really looking at me, "that's one thing in your favor. Elliot, isn't it?" "Yeah, Elliot Harwood." "Fine, you'll be on nights till further notice. Keep the desk manned unless there's an emergency. Check the lounge at 10:30, lock the bar hatch at 11, and don't let anyone into the back corridor unless they're staff." Then she glanced over my shoulder at the front doors, as if worried someone might overhear. "And if any guest mentions noises from above, you apologize, say the pipes knock in cold weather, and leave it at that." I thought maybe she was testing me, seeing how I'd react. "Noises from above? The upper floor is shut," she said. "Storm damage from years ago, some issue with the old plumbing. None of your concern. Guests hear things because they're in a draughty Victorian building by the sea and have had too much wine with dinner. That's all." The way she said it made it obvious that it was very much not all, but I wasn't about to push on my first 10 minutes in the place. She gave me a quick tour anyway, brisk and joyless, as though every extra word cost her. Breakfast room, private lounge, staff loo, linen cupboard, office, kitchen swing doors you weren't to use unless the chef invited you, the old lift that sometimes jammed between floors. If people insisted on treating it like Blackpool Pleasure Beach and the service stairwell at the back, narrow and steep, paint flaking off the banister in strips. When we reached the fire door leading to it, she stopped. That stays shut after midnight. Why? Because that's the rule. I remember smiling a bit and saying, right, in that way you do when you're trying not to sound like you've noticed someone's being weird. But then she added, guests don't like hearing footsteps there. It was such a specific thing to say that it stuck with me straight away. Not drafts, not bangs, footsteps. Before I could ask anything else, the outer door of the hotel opened, and a woman came in dragging one of those hard-shell suitcases that always sound far too loud on tiled floors. She was probably in her 30s, red-cheeked from the cold, and she looked relieved to have made it inside. Maureen's whole manner changed at once. Smile on, voice softer, all professionalism. Evening, checking in? The woman nodded and pushed a printed confirmation across the desk. While Maureen dealt with it, I stood off to one side trying not to look in the way. The woman noticed my bag and asked if I was new. I told her I'd just started. She gave me this odd look then. Not rude, just the sort of look people get when they're about to say something and decide against it. What room am I in? She asked Maureen. 308. The woman hesitated. Not upstairs then? Maureen's smile went thin. We don't put guests on the closed floor. Good, the woman said, almost under her breath. Then she turned to me while Maureen was sorting the key card and said quietly, if the phone rings after 2 in the morning, don't answer it straight away. I genuinely thought I must have misheard her. Sorry? But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen, because she just shook her head slightly, as if she'd said too much, took her key, and followed me to the lift without another word. I carried her suitcase up to the 3rd floor. The corridor up there was lined with faded wallpaper the color of weak tea, and every few steps the floorboards under the carpet gave a soft sinking creak. Halfway to her room, the woman stopped walking and looked up, not at me but at the ceiling. You hear that? She whispered. I stood still. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then there was another sound above us. Not loud, just a slow, deliberate thud, then another, footsteps by the sound of them. Someone crossing overhead where, if Maureen was telling the truth, no one was meant to be staying. The woman's face changed so quickly it got under my skin. 1 second embarrassed, the next genuinely frightened, pale, jaw tight, eyes fixed upward. That's exactly what I heard last time, she said. Last time? She pressed her lips together and gave a tiny shake of the head like she'd made a mistake. Doesn't matter. Forget it. I laughed again, weaker this time. Probably staff, maybe? She looked straight at me then and said, at 6:30 in the evening, directly above a sealed floor? I didn't know what to say to that. I put her case outside 308, wished her a good stay, and tried to act like nothing about the exchange had bothered me. But walking back to the lift alone, I kept listening for the sound overhead and didn't hear it again. My shift properly started after that. Nadine from breakfast service came through reception in her coat on the way out, introduced herself, told me never to trust the boiler or the vending machine, and then lowered her voice and asked, did Maureen do the speech? What speech? The one where she tells you nothing's wrong while sounding exactly like something's wrong. I smiled, but she didn't. You'll hear things, she said. Most of it's the building, not all of it. Then she was gone, out into the dark, with her scarf pulled up around her mouth, leaving me behind the desk with the booking screen glowing at my face, and the whole hotel settling around me in clicks and sighs and distant knocks. For an hour or so, that was all it was. A quiet shift. One man asked for another towel. An elderly couple wanted to know whether breakfast started at 7 or 1/2 I checked the lounge, straightened a stack of leaflets nobody ever reads, made myself a cup of tea that tasted faintly of washing up liquid, and started to think I'd built the place up in my head. Then, a little after 9, the phone on the reception desk rang. Not the main outside line, the internal one. I glanced automatically at the display panel beside it, expecting a room number from one of the occupied floors. Instead, it showed 412. For a second, I just stared at it, because even on my first night, I knew there shouldn't have been a 412 in use. Maureen had said the upper floor was shut. The woman in 308 had clearly been frightened by footsteps above her. and now a room that was meant to be empty was calling down to reception. I picked up anyway. "Reception," I said. "Elliot speaking. How can I help?" There was silence at first, not dead silence either. The line was open. I could hear something faint in the background, breathing maybe, or fabric moving close to the mouthpiece. Then a child's voice, very soft, said, "Is my mom still looking for me?" And every hair on my arms went up at once. I didn't answer straight away. Not because I didn't want to, but because something about the voice didn't sit right. It wasn't just that it was a child. It was how quiet it was. Careful. Like whoever was speaking didn't want anyone else in the room to hear them. Sorry? I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "Can you repeat that?" A pause. Then a little clearer this time, but still hushed. "Is she still asking for me?" I felt this cold, creeping sensation start at the back of my neck. "Who's asking for you?" I asked. "What's your room number?" Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Then, almost like the child was confused by the question, "This one." I glanced down again at the display. 412. Still there, still blinking. "Right," I said slowly. "Okay, listen, are you alone in the room?" There was a faint sound then, not a voice. Something like a soft scrape or fabric brushing against something wooden. It was subtle, but in the silence of the reception desk, it sounded far too loud. "No," the child whispered. My grip tightened on the receiver. "Who's with you?" And that was when the line went dead. Just like that. No click, no shuffle, nothing. 1 second there was breathing on the other end, the next it was just empty. I kept the phone to my ear for a moment longer, like something might come back. It didn't. I slowly lowered it back onto the cradle and just stood there, staring at the desk. I honestly thought, for a second, that I'd misunderstood the whole thing, that maybe it had been a crossed line or some weird glitch in the system, that the number on the display was wrong or the voice hadn't been what I thought it was. But that didn't explain the question. Is my mom still looking for me? That wasn't something you mishear. I turned in my chair and looked up toward the ceiling, as if I could somehow see through the floors. Everything above me was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel natural, like something has just stopped rather than never been there in the first place. I reached over and tapped the internal call button, bringing up the room directory. My finger hovered over the number for a second before I pressed it. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I let it ring longer than I probably should have. Part of me expected that same small voice to come back on the line, maybe laugh, maybe say something worse this time. But there was nothing, just the steady, hollow ringing echoing down a line that shouldn't have existed. Eventually, I hung up. "Right," I muttered to myself, sitting back in the chair. "Okay, think, because there had to be an explanation. There always is. Someone could have got hold of a key, staff error, system glitch, kid messing about with the phone. That last one didn't sit right either. There had been something off about the tone. Not playful, not like a prank. If anything, it had sounded cautious, like they were checking something. I pushed the chair back and stood up. I could have left it. I probably should have, if I'm being honest. First night, not my place to go wandering into closed-off areas because of a strange call. But then that thought crept back in. What if there actually was a child up there? What if they weren't meant to be? I grabbed the master key from the hook beneath the desk. It was heavier than it looked. A thick plastic card attached to a faded blue fob with staff access scratched across it in worn lettering. My hand felt colder just holding it. "Just check," I said quietly, like I needed permission from the empty lobby. "That's all." The lift was closer, but I didn't take it. I don't really know why. Maybe because of what the woman had said earlier. Or maybe because lifts in old buildings always feel too enclosed when you're already on edge. Either way, I turned toward the corridor that led to the stairs instead. Not the service stairwell, the main one. Even that felt different at night. The lights were dimmer than they'd been earlier, or maybe it just felt that way. Shadows sat in the corners where the walls met, and every step I took seemed louder than it should have been, the sound carrying up and away from me. Second floor, quiet. Third floor, same. I paused there for a moment, halfway between going back down and continuing up. The corridor stretched out in front of me, identical doors on either side, all closed, all still. Somewhere behind one of them, a television murmured faintly. Normal. That was normal. I almost turned around then, but then I heard it. Above me, a slow, deliberate step. Then another, not loud, not rushed, steady, like someone pacing, exactly the way the woman in 308 had described it. My stomach dropped. I stood there for a second, listening, trying to convince myself it was something else. Pipes, old wood settling, anything. But no, there it was again, a footstep, directly overhead. And before I could stop myself, I found my foot on the next stair, then the next, moving upward toward a floor I'd already been told was empty, toward 412. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, I already knew something wasn't right. Not in that vague, uneasy way from earlier, but properly wrong. The kind of feeling that settles deep in your chest and doesn't shift no matter how hard you try to explain it away. The door to the upper floor was exactly where Maureen had shown me earlier. Fire door, metal push bar, a small rectangular window set into the top half. When I'd seen it before, it had just looked like any other restricted access point. Now, standing in front of it alone, it felt different. There was light on the other side. Not bright, not enough to fully illuminate the corridor beyond, but enough that I could see a dull, yellowish glow bleeding through the wired glass, like a lamp had been left on somewhere it shouldn't have been. I hesitated. I honestly thought, this is stupid. Go back downstairs, call someone, wake Maureen, do anything but this. But then that voice came back into my head. Is my mom still looking for me? And that was enough. I pushed the bar. The door opened with a slow, dragging creak, like it hadn't been used in a long time. The sound echoed far too loudly into the space beyond, and for a moment I just stood there, half expecting someone to answer it. No one did. The corridor ahead stretched out longer than the others below, narrower too, the ceiling slightly lower, in a way that made the whole place feel compressed. The wallpaper was peeling in strips along the walls, exposing darker patches underneath, and the carpet had that uneven, spongy feel of something that had been soaked and dried too many times. But it wasn't abandoned. That was the first thing that hit me. For a floor that was supposed to be shut, it didn't feel unused. The air wasn't stale. There wasn't that heavy, closed-in smell you get in rooms that haven't been opened in years. If anything, it smelled faintly, lived in, warm, slightly damp, but not dead. And the lights, there were lights on. Not all of them, just a few scattered along the corridor, casting long shadows between the doorways. Enough to see, but not enough to feel comfortable. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Too loud, too out of place. No response. I stepped inside anyway. The door swung shut behind me with a dull thud that made me flinch more than I care to admit. I turned back instinctively, half expecting it not to open again, but when I pressed the bar, it gave easily enough. That should have reassured me. It didn't. I turned back to the corridor and took a few slow steps forward. Every movement felt deliberate, like I was trying not to disturb something I couldn't see. The silence up here was different from the floors below, thicker, like it absorbed sound instead of carrying it. And then I heard it again. A footstep. Not above me this time, in front of me. I froze. It had been close. Close enough that I could tell exactly where it came from, somewhere further down the corridor, just out of view where it bent slightly to the left. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Hotel staff? Is someone there?" Nothing. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I started walking again, slower now, my eyes fixed on that bend in the corridor. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the floor itself was resisting me. As I got closer, I noticed something else. One of the doors ahead, on the right-hand side, was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just enough to leave a narrow gap, a thin line of darkness cutting into the frame. I stopped a few feet away from it. That uneasy feeling from earlier had twisted into something sharper now, focused, like every instinct I had was telling me not to go any further. But I did anyway, because that was the room. I didn't even need to check the number at first. Something about it just felt wrong in a way the others didn't. But when I stepped closer and tilted my head slightly, I could just make out the brass plate on the door. 4-2. My throat went dry. I reached out and knocked. 3 quick taps. The sound seemed to echo too far, like the room behind the door was bigger than it should have been. No answer. I waited. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. "Hello? I need you to open the door." Still nothing. I was about to try the handle when I heard it, not from inside the room, from behind me, a soft, almost inaudible shift of weight, like someone had just taken a step. I turned around, and for a split second, less than that really, I saw someone standing at the far end of the corridor, a woman, tall, still, facing me. She was too far away to make out properly, but I could see enough to know she wasn't staff. Dark hair, a long coat, navy or black, I couldn't tell in the low light. Her arms hung at her sides in a way that felt unnatural, like she'd been placed there rather than walked there. We just looked at each other. Neither of us moved. And then, this is the part I still can't explain properly. She wasn't there anymore. Not like she walked away. Not like she turned a corner. She was just gone. Like someone had switched her off. I stood there staring at the empty space where she'd been, my heart suddenly hammering so hard it felt like it was shaking my whole body. That's not, I whispered to myself. That's not possible. But even as I said it, I knew what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. I took a step back without meaning to, my shoulder brushing against the door of 412. And that's when it creaked open slightly wider. I froze. The gap widened just enough for a sliver of the room inside to become visible. Darkness, mostly, but not complete. There was something in there catching the light from the corridor, something low to the ground. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I didn't just turn around and leave right then. But I leaned forward slightly, just enough to look through the gap, and what I saw made my stomach drop completely. There was someone inside the room, not standing, not moving, sitting on the floor just beside the bed, small, too small to be an adult, and slowly, very slowly, their head turned toward the door. I don't remember deciding to open the door. 1 second I was standing there, frozen, staring through that narrow gap, and the next my hand was already pushing against it, the hinges letting out a low, dragging groan as it swung inward. The room was colder than the corridor. Not slightly colder, properly cold, the kind that hits the back of your throat when you breathe in too quickly. The lights were off, but there was just enough dull glow from the hallway behind me to make out shapes. Bed, wardrobe, desk, and the figure on the floor. They didn't move as I stepped inside. I could feel my heart pounding so loudly it almost drowned everything else out. For a second, I genuinely thought maybe I'd been wrong, that it was just a pile of something, clothes maybe, towels. But then it shifted, just slightly, and I realized it was a child, sitting with their knees pulled in, arms wrapped loosely around them, head tilted at an angle that didn't look comfortable. Their hair, dark, thin, slightly damp, hung forward, partially covering their face. "Hey," I said quietly, my voice catching more than I wanted it to. "It's all right. I'm staff. You? Are you okay?" No response. They just sat there, still watching me, or at least I thought they were. I took another step forward, the carpet giving slightly under my weight. "What's your name?" I asked. "Are you staying here? No, where are your parents?" Nothing. Then, very slowly, the child lifted one hand and pointed, not at me, not at the door, behind me. A cold wave ran straight through my chest. I didn't turn straight away. I honestly thought, just don't look. Get the kid and leave. But something about the way they were pointing, so deliberate, so certain, made it impossible not to. So I turned. The doorway was empty. The corridor beyond it stretched out exactly as it had before. Dim lights, long shadows, no movement, and yet something felt different. It's hard to explain properly. The space looked the same, but it didn't feel the same, like the air itself had shifted, like I wasn't alone up here anymore. I turned back to the child quickly. "Listen," I said, sharper now, trying to force some control back into the situation. "We need to go downstairs, all right? You shouldn't be up here." The child's hand had lowered again. They were looking at me now, properly. And I wish I could say there was something obviously wrong, something clear I could point to and explain away the way I felt in that moment. But there wasn't. They just looked normal, too normal. No visible injuries, no tears, no panic. Just a calm, flat expression that didn't match anything about the situation. Then they spoke, quiet, almost the same tone as the voice on the phone. "She said you'd come." My chest tightened. "Who said that?" No hesitation this time. The lady. A pause. Then softer, like it mattered more than anything else. She said not to go with you. Every instinct I had screamed at me then. Something was deeply wrong. "Right?" I said, forcing myself to stay steady. "Okay, that's fine. You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to, but we do need to find your mom, yeah? At that, something changed. Not dramatically, just a flicker, confusion maybe, or something like it. I was with her, the child said, but she keeps moving the room. I stared at them. What do you mean? They tilted their heads slightly, as if the answer should have been obvious. It's not the same place every time. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't even know what it meant. All right, I said finally. We're just going to go downstairs, okay? We'll sort it out there. I took a step closer, reaching out slowly, carefully, trying not to startle them. And that's when the temperature dropped again. Not gradually, all at once, like something had opened behind me. A cold draft hit the back of my neck so sharply I flinched. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. The kind of cold that doesn't belong indoors. The child's eyes shifted past me again. Don't, they whispered. Too late. I turned, and this time she was closer, much closer, standing just outside the doorway. The woman I'd seen at the end of the corridor. Only now I could see her properly. Her coat was darker than I thought. Not just navy, almost black in places, damp along the edges like she'd walked through rain that never dried. Her hair hung straight down, framing a face that should have been familiar somehow but wasn't, because it didn't change. That was the worst part. No expression, no movement, just a fixed, quiet stillness, like she wasn't reacting to anything in the room at all. Her eyes weren't on me, they were on the child. Come on, she said softly. The voice was wrong, too smooth, too calm, like it didn't belong in the space it was in. The child didn't move, neither did I. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, every part of me locked between stepping forward and backing away. You shouldn't be here, I managed, my voice barely holding together. This floor is closed. The woman didn't respond. She just took a single step forward, not fast, not threatening, but deliberate. And that was enough. I grabbed the child's arm. Come on, I said, sharper now, panic cutting through everything else. We're leaving. For a second, they resisted. Not violently, just didn't move, like they were waiting for something. Then suddenly they stood. And the moment they did, the woman stopped. Completely, no movement at all. We passed her. I don't even remember deciding to do it. I just pulled the child toward the door and out into the corridor, my focus locked entirely on getting to the stairs, on putting distance between us and whatever that was behind us. I expected to hear footsteps, to feel her follow, to see her in the corner of my eye. But there was nothing. Just silence. Thick, suffocating silence. We reached the stairwell door and I shoved it open, practically dragging the child through with me. The moment the door swung shut behind us, the temperature shifted again, like stepping out of a freezer. I didn't stop until we were halfway down to the third floor. Only then did I let go. Only then did I realize my hands were shaking. All right, I said, trying to steady my breathing. You're safe now. I stopped. Because when I looked at them properly, really looked this time, they didn't look like a child I recognized. Not from the lobby, not from check-in, not from anywhere. And for the first time since this had started, a different thought pushed its way through the fear. A worse one. I need you to tell me your name, I said quietly. They blinked at me. Then after a long pause, they said, I don't think I have one anymore. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because whatever I thought I just dealt with upstairs, I realized I didn't understand it at all. I didn't bring the child straight to reception. I probably should have. That would have been the normal thing to do. But nothing about that situation felt normal anymore, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I walked them back through the lobby, under the lights, past the desk, into something that felt safe, they might just disappear. Or worse. So I stopped on the third floor landing instead. It was warmer there, quieter in a different way. Not that suffocating silence from upstairs, just the low hum of a building settling into the night. Pipes ticking. A faint television somewhere behind a closed door, real sounds, grounding sounds. I crouched down slightly to their level, trying to slow my breathing, trying to think clearly. All right, I said, softer this time. Let's just take this one step at a time, yeah? You're safe here. No one's going to take you anywhere. They didn't respond, just stood there, looking at me with that same calm, almost detached expression. I swallowed. Do you remember coming into the hotel? With your parents or anyone? A pause. Then they shook their head. I was already here. That answer didn't even feel like it made sense. What do you mean, already here? I asked. They glanced up the stairs briefly, just a flicker, then back at me. I was in the room. Room 412? A small nod. My stomach tightened again. Okay, I said slowly. And your mom, the one you mentioned on the phone, where is she now? That got a reaction. Not panic, not fear. Something closer to confusion. She keeps forgetting where I am, they said, but she always comes back. A cold feeling crept into my chest again. Is she the woman upstairs? I asked carefully. The one in the dark coat? This time, the child didn't answer straight away. They just looked at me for a long moment, like they were trying to decide something. Then quietly, she doesn't like it when people take me away from the room. Before I could respond, a door further down the corridor opened. I flinched. Actually flinched, like I'd been caught doing something wrong. An older man stepped out into the hallway, adjusting his glasses as he looked toward us. Late 60s maybe. Dressing gown, slippers, the sort of guest you'd expect to complain about noise rather than cause it. He frowned slightly. Everything all right? I stood up quickly. Yeah, sorry. Just sorting something out. His eyes moved past me to the child, and the change in his face was immediate. I don't mean mild concern. I mean real, visible discomfort. He stared for half a second too long, then looked back at me sharply. You shouldn't have them up here. I blinked. Sorry? They're not meant to be on this floor, he said, his voice lower now, tense. You know that. I what? I glanced back at the child, then at him again. I just found them upstairs. I'm taking them down to reception. No, he cut in, shaking his head. That's not what I mean. There was something in his tone that made my chest tighten again. What do you mean then? I asked. He hesitated. Actually hesitated, like he was weighing up whether to say anything at all. Then he leaned slightly closer and said, almost under his breath, you shouldn't be encouraging it. Encouraging what? I felt a flicker of irritation cut through the fear. Look, I don't know what you think's going on, but there's a kid wandering around a closed floor. There isn't, he said firmly. Silence. I stared at him. Then, slowly, I turned back toward where the child had been standing. And for a split second, just a split second, I genuinely thought they were gone. My heart jumped straight into my throat. But then I saw them, still there. Were they not moving, not reacting? Just watching. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and turned back to the man. They're right here. He followed my gaze, and that was when everything shifted again. Because he didn't look at them, not properly. His eyes passed straight over the spot where the child was standing, then flicked back to me with something that looked dangerously close to fear. There's no one there, he said. I felt the ground drop out from under me. What are you talking about? I said, my voice tightening. There I stopped, because I realized something. The man wasn't pretending. He wasn't confused. He genuinely couldn't see them. That's not, I muttered more to myself than to him. That's not possible. The man took a small step back, clearly unsettled now. You need to go downstairs, he said. Right now. And you need to stop, whatever this is. I'm not doing anything, I snapped, the frustration bleeding through. There's a child here. No, he said again, more forcefully this time. There isn't. The corridor fell silent, completely silent. Even the distant sounds from other rooms seemed to fade, like the building itself was holding its breath. I slowly turned back to the child. They were still watching me, but something about them had changed. Not physically, subtly. Their expression wasn't neutral anymore. There was something else there now. Something that hadn't been there before. Awareness. You see me, they said quietly. It wasn't a question. I nodded, barely able to find my voice. Yeah, I do. Another pause. Then, almost gently, most people don't. A chill ran straight through me. Behind me, the man shifted uncomfortably. Who are you talking to? He asked. I didn't answer, because I didn't know how to. Instead, I looked back at the child and asked the only thing that felt like it mattered anymore. Why me? They tilted their heads slightly, as if considering it, then they said, because you answered the phone. That hit harder than anything else so far. Not the woman, not the empty room, not even the fact that no one else could see them. It was that simple, quiet statement, like something had been waiting, listening, choosing. I felt my chest tighten again, a slow creeping tracing the sharp panic from earlier. Answered. What phone? The man asked behind me, his voice thin now, but I still didn't respond because I already knew. The moment I picked up that call, something had noticed. Something had reached back. And now, whether I liked it or not, I was part of it. I didn't say anything else to the man in the corridor. I couldn't, because there was no way to explain what I was seeing without sounding completely unhinged, and the look on his face told me he was already halfway there himself. "Just go back to your room," I said quietly, not even sure if I was speaking to him or trying to convince myself everything was still under control. "I'll sort it." He didn't argue. That was the strange part. He just gave me one last uneasy look, like he wanted to say something else but decided against it. Then stepped back inside his room and closed the door a little too quickly. The click of the latch echoed down the corridor, and just like that, it was silent again. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door he'd gone through, waiting for something else to happen, for it to open again, for him to come back out and tell me this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But it didn't. Nothing did. Just the low hum of the building and the child standing beside me. I exhaled slowly and turned back to them. "Right," I said, trying to regain some sense of control. "We're not staying up here." They didn't argue, didn't resist, just watched me the same way they had been since the room, quiet, patient, like they already knew how this was going to play out. That made it worse somehow. We walked down the stairs together. Well, I walked. They moved beside me, but I couldn't hear their footsteps. Not once. I noticed it halfway down and tried to ignore it. Told myself it was just the angle, the carpet, anything. But once you notice something like that, you can't unnotice it. Every step I took echoed faintly. Theirs didn't. By the time we reached the ground floor, my nerves were already shot. The lobby looked exactly the same as I'd left it. Lamp still on, desk still tidy, the quiet ticking of the wall clock filling the space. For a second, it almost felt normal again, like I could just sit back down, write the whole thing off, and pretend it hadn't happened. But then I looked at the child, still there, still watching. I walked behind the desk and grabbed the guest register, flipping it open with slightly shaking hands. "All right," I said, more to ground myself than anything else. "Let's try this again." I scanned the names, couples, families, a few single bookings, nothing out of place, no missing child, no lone guest that didn't make sense. I turned to the computer next, pulling up the digital system Maureen had shown me earlier. It took longer to load than it should have, the screen flickering once before settling. Same result. No record, nothing. "You're not in here," I muttered. "I told you," the child replied softly. I froze for a second, then looked at them again. "Yeah, I know. I didn't finish that sentence, because what was I even trying to prove anymore? That they existed? That they didn't? Neither option felt better than the other. "All right," I said finally, rubbing a hand over my face. "Then we'll do it another way." I picked up the internal phone again, the same one that had rung before. For a second, I just stared at it. I could still remember exactly how it felt, the weight of the receiver, the silence on the other end, that voice asking a question that didn't belong. Part of me didn't want to touch it again, but I did anyway. I dialed 412. The line rang once, twice, then it connected, not to ringing, to breathing. My stomach dropped instantly. It was faint, uneven, like someone was trying to stay quiet. I didn't say anything at first, neither did they. We just stayed there, connected, listening. Then slowly I said, "Hello?" The breathing stopped. For a split second there was nothing. Then a voice, not the child's, a woman's, soft, calm, too calm. "You've taken her out of the room." Every muscle in my body went rigid. I didn't even realize I had tightened my grip on the receiver until my fingers started to ache. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice lower now, controlled but only just. A pause. Then, "That isn't where she belongs." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. "She's a child," I said. "She doesn't belong in an empty room." Silence. Then almost gently, "You don't understand how this works yet." Yet. That word stuck. "Then explain it," I said, sharper now. "Because right now it looks like someone's been keeping a child in a locked room on a closed floor." Another pause, longer this time. And when she spoke again, her voice had changed. Not louder, not aggressive, just closer. Like she was no longer speaking through the phone. "She isn't lost," the woman said. "She's been left." My breath caught. I glanced at the child instinctively. They hadn't moved, but their expression had shifted again, subtly, like they were listening. "She said you'd say that," the child whispered. The phone line crackled softly, and then the woman spoke again. "You answered when she called," she said. "So now you can see her." A tight, sinking feeling settled in my chest. "What does that mean?" I asked, but I already knew I wasn't going to get a straight answer. "You'll figure it out," she said. Then quieter. "Everyone does, eventually." The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone, the silence pressing in around me again. Slowly, I lowered the receiver back into place. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then the child said very softly, "She's going to be upset now." I swallowed. "Why?" A pause. Then, "Because you took me somewhere she can't follow." That didn't make sense. None of it did. But before I could respond, the lights in the lobby flickered. Just once. Quick, subtle. But enough. I looked up instinctively, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw someone standing just beyond the front doors, out on the street, watching. When the light steadied again, they were gone. I turned slowly back to the child, and that creeping dread from earlier settled deeper this time. Heavier, more certain, because whatever was happening here, it wasn't contained to that room anymore, and I had the distinct sinking feeling that I hadn't rescued anything. I just moved it. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I stayed behind the reception desk, lights on, every sense tuned to the smallest sound, like I was waiting for something to happen again. The child, if that's even the right word anymore, sat in one of the armchairs in the corner of the lobby, legs tucked up, watching nothing in particular. They didn't ask for food, didn't move much, didn't seem tired. That alone should have told me everything. But I kept trying to treat it like something normal. Around 1:30, I made another cup of tea I didn't drink. Around 2, I walked the length of the ground floor twice just to convince myself I still could. Every so often, I'd glance at the child to make sure they were still there. They always were. Still, quiet, patient, waiting. I checked the clock again, 2:14 a.m. For some reason, that made my stomach tighten. I don't know why. There was nothing special about the time, nothing I'd been told, nothing I could point to. Just a feeling. The same kind of feeling you get when you wake up in the middle of the night and know something's wrong before you've even opened your eyes. 2:16, I looked at the phone. I hadn't meant to. I just did. It rang, sharp, sudden, loud enough to make me physically jump. The exact same internal line. I didn't even need to look at the display this time. I already knew. I stared at it for a second, my hand hovering just above the receiver. I didn't want to answer, not again, but at the same time, I knew I had to, because whatever this was, it wasn't going away. And pretending it wasn't happening clearly wasn't an option anymore. So I picked it up, slowly, carefully. "Reception," I said, though my voice sounded tighter now, thinner, Elliot speaking. There was no breathing this time, no hesitation, just the woman's voice, clear, close. "Put her back." My chest tightened immediately. "No." The word came out before I'd even fully thought it through. There was a pause. Then, very softly, "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand enough," I said, glancing over at the child instinctively. "She's not staying in that room." Another pause, longer this time. And when she spoke again, there was something else in her voice. Not anger, something worse. Certainty. "You've already moved the door." My grip on the receiver tightened again. What does that mean? No answer. Instead, I heard something behind the voice. A sound, faint at first, then clearer. Footsteps, not through the phone. Behind me, I froze. The woman didn't hang up, didn't speak again. Just stayed on the line, listening, waiting. Slowly, I turned around. The lobby was empty. The chairs, the desk, the door, everything exactly where it should be. Except the child was no longer in the armchair. My heart dropped instantly. "What did you do?" I said into the phone, my voice shaking now, despite myself. The woman's reply was immediate. I didn't move her. The footsteps came again, clearer now. Not from the lobby, from the corridor leading toward the guest rooms. I dropped the phone. Didn't even think about it. Just let it fall and ran. The corridor felt longer than it had before. Darker too, even though the lights were still on. My footsteps echoed sharply against the walls as I moved, the sound chasing itself ahead of me like something trying to catch up. "Hello?" I called out. "Where are you?" No answer, but I could hear movement. Soft, measured, just ahead. I rounded the corner toward the main hallway and stopped dead. At the far end of the corridor, I saw them, the child, standing perfectly still, facing away from me, and just beyond them, something else, not fully visible, not clearly shaped, just a darker space against the dim light, like someone standing just out of reach of it. "Don't move," I said quickly, my voice sharper than I intended. "Stay right there." The child didn't respond, didn't turn, didn't even react. They just stood there, and then, very slowly, they took a step forward, not toward me, away, into that darker part of the corridor. "No, wait," I said, moving forward quickly now. "Stop." Another step, closer to the shadows, closer to whatever was standing just beyond the light. "Don't," I said again, louder this time. And that's when the lights flickered. Not once, not briefly. They dropped. The entire corridor plunged into darkness, complete, total. The kind of black you can feel pressing against your eyes. I stopped moving instantly, my breathing loud in my ears, my hands instinctively reaching out in front of me like that would somehow help. "Hello?" I said, but my voice sounded wrong now, smaller. No response, just silence. And then a whisper, close, far too close. Not ahead of me, beside me. "You shouldn't have answered." I spun toward the sound, but there was nothing to see. Just darkness, just that suffocating absolute dark. And then the lights came back, all at once, harsh, bright, blinding for a second. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The corridor was empty, completely empty. No child, no shadow, no one. I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself I hadn't just imagined the entire thing. But I hadn't, because slowly, very slowly, I noticed something on the floor, near where the child had been standing, a small object, dark against the carpet. I stepped closer, and when I bent down to pick it up, my stomach dropped. It was a ribbon, thin, slightly damp, the same one I'd seen earlier in room 412, which meant only one thing. They hadn't disappeared. They'd been taken. And this time, I wasn't there to stop it. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the ribbon in my hand. I don't know how long exactly. Could have been seconds. Could have been minutes. Time didn't feel right anymore. Not since that call. Not since I'd gone up to that floor. It was real. That was the part I couldn't shake. It wasn't something I'd imagined. It wasn't stress or lack of sleep or the building playing tricks on me. The ribbon was damp, slightly cold against my fingers, like it had only just been dropped. And the child? They were gone. A sharp, heavy feeling settled in my chest then. Not panic this time, not the sudden kind. Something slower, worse, like I already knew what it meant. I turned and walked back toward reception, my steps slower now, more deliberate, like I was trying not to disturb something again, even though I wasn't sure what that something was anymore. The lobby looked exactly the same as before, too normal. That was starting to bother me more than anything else. I placed the ribbon on the desk and leaned forward slightly, gripping the edge with both hands. My reflection stared back at me faintly in the glass panel behind the counter. Pale, eyes wider than they should have been, like I hadn't quite caught up to everything that had just happened. "All right," I muttered under my breath. "Think. Just think." Because panicking wasn't going to help. Running around the hotel blindly wasn't going to help. I needed to figure out what this thing was, what it wanted, why it had pulled me into it, and more importantly, where it had taken the child. I reached for the phone again, hesitating only briefly before pressing the button for reception records. If someone had accessed room 4 and 12 earlier, if there was any movement on that floor, there had to be something logged. The screen flickered once as it loaded, then stabilized. I pulled up the internal activity logs. Calls, door access, maintenance overrides. My eyes scanned the entries quickly at first, then slower, more focused. Most of it was routine. Ground floor doors opening and closing, staff access in the kitchen, a few guest room entries, nothing out of place. Until, there it was, a line I hadn't noticed before. Room 412, door access, stomach tightened. I scrolled further. Another entry. Room 412 tells exactly the time the phone had rung, exactly the time the child had disappeared. "That's not," I muttered, shaking my head slightly. "That's not possible, because that room shouldn't even be active, shouldn't even register." And yet, it was. I leaned back slightly, running a hand through my hair, trying to process it, and that's when I noticed something else. A second set of entries. Not just 412, other rooms, scattered, different floors. Room 308, dorm 214. Dorm team. All within the same window, all within minutes of each other, all logged as accessed, but not by any keycard ID, just manual override. A slow, creeping dread settled deeper in my chest, because that didn't make sense. Manual overrides weren't random. They required staff access, physical access. Someone would have had to be moving through the hotel, opening doors deliberately, and doing it quietly enough that no one noticed. Except I had noticed. The footsteps, the movement, the way the child had reacted. My mind jumped back to something they'd said earlier. It's not the same place every time. I stared at the screen, then back at the ribbon, then at the corridor beyond the lobby. And for the first time, a different possibility started to form. Not that something was moving through the hotel, but that something was moving the hotel. Not physically, not in a way you could see, but in how it worked, which rooms connected, which doors led where, who could be reached and who couldn't. No, I whispered, that's not. A sound cut me off. Soft, close, from behind the desk. I froze. Very slowly, I turned my head. The staff corridor, the one Maureen had shown me earlier, the one that led to the service stairwell. The door was slightly open, just a few inches, enough to leave a narrow gap, enough to let something be seen through it, or to let something see out. I didn't remember leaving it open. I was sure I hadn't. I stared at it for a moment, my heart beginning to pick up again, that slow dread turning sharp once more. Then, very quietly, I heard it, a voice, soft, familiar. My breath caught. Hello? I called back, my voice cautious now. Is someone there? A pause. Then Elliot, my chest tightened instantly. I knew that voice, not from the hotel, from earlier. From the phone. The child. They're not letting me out, the voice whispered. The sound seemed to come from just beyond the door. Close, too close. I moved slowly toward it, every step feeling heavier than it should have. I'm here, I said quietly. Just stay where you are, all right? I'm coming. I reached the door, stopped. My hand hovered over the handle. Something about it felt wrong. Not the door itself, what was behind it? The voice had sounded close, but that corridor shouldn't connect to any guest rooms, shouldn't connect to 412, shouldn't connect to anything like that. Elliot, the voice said again, softer now. Please. That was enough. I pushed the door open. The corridor beyond was dark, much darker than it should have been. The single overhead light flickered weakly, casting uneven shadows along the narrow passage. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and the air smelled faintly of damp and something older, something stale. Where are you? I asked, stepping inside. No answer, just silence. I took another step forward, then another, and that's when I noticed something. At the far end of the corridor, there was another door. I didn't remember there being another door. Maureen hadn't shown me one. It shouldn't have been there, but it was, slightly ajar, a thin line of light spilling out from the gap. I swallowed, slowly made my way toward it, each step louder than the last in the tight space, the air growing colder the closer I got. Then, just before I reached it, I heard something from inside. Not a voice, not movement, breathing, more than one. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to stop, to turn around, to get out. But I couldn't, not with the child possibly on the other side. I reached out, pushed the door open slightly wider, and looked inside. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The room didn't look like a hotel room. It looked wrong, too large, too empty, like a space that didn't belong inside the building at all. And then I saw them, the child, standing in the center of the room, facing away from me, and around them, shapes, not clear, not fully visible, but there, close, watching, waiting. My heart slammed against my chest. Don't move, I said quickly. I've got you. Just the child slowly turned their head, and when I saw their face, I felt something inside me drop completely, because it wasn't the same. It looked like them, but something had changed, subtly, deeply, in a way I couldn't explain. Their expression wasn't calm anymore. It wasn't confused, knowing. You came back, they said, and behind them, something shifted. I didn't step into the room. Not fully. Something stopped me. It wasn't a sound, it wasn't movement. It was just instinct, the kind that hits before your brain has time to explain it. like stepping too close to the edge of something and knowing without seeing it that there's a drop waiting. So I stayed in the doorway, half in the corridor, half out. "Come here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now." The child didn't move. They just stood there in the center of that space, because it didn't feel like a room anymore. It still had the shape of four walls, a ceiling, but the proportions were wrong. The distance between things didn't match up. The far wall seemed further away than it should have been, and the light inside didn't fall properly, like it didn't know where it was meant to land. And those shapes around them, they weren't solid. Not like people, more like gaps. Darker patches where the light thinned out, shifting slightly when I tried to focus on them. Watching. Always watching. "Elliot," the child said again, quieter now. "You're not meant to stand there." My chest tightened. "Why not?" A pause. Then, because that's where it starts changing. That word again, changing. The same idea from before. Rooms not staying the same. Doors leading somewhere else. I glanced back over my shoulder instinctively. The corridor behind me looked normal, too normal. Same dim light, same narrow walls, same service pipes overhead. But something about it felt further away, like I'd already stepped further in than I realized. "No," I muttered to myself. "No, that's not." A sound cut me off, a soft creak. Behind me, I turned. The door I'd just come through, it was gone. Not closed, gone, replaced by wall, flat, peeling paint where the frame should have been. My breath caught hard in my throat. "That's not possible," I said out loud, more sharply this time, like saying it would somehow force it to be true. Behind me, the child shifted slightly. "You took too long," they said. I turned back to them slowly. "What do you mean?" They tilted their head. "She's moved it again." A cold wave rolled through my chest. "Who has?" But I already knew the answer. The woman, the voice on the phone, the one who said I'd moved the door, the one who said I didn't understand how it worked. I looked around the room again, really looked this time, and the more I focused, the worse it became. The walls weren't stable, not properly. They held their shape if I didn't stare too long, but if I fixed my eyes on one spot, I could see it shift slightly, like something behind it was pushing outward, testing it. The air felt thicker too, heavier, like breathing through damp fabric. "All right," I said, forcing myself to stay focused. That's fine. We'll just find another way out." The child didn't respond. They just watched me. That same expression, knowing, like they'd heard that before. I took a slow step forward. The floor dipped slightly under my weight, not enough to lose balance, just enough to notice. I stopped, looked down. The carpet didn't match the hotel. Not the pattern, not the texture. It was older, darker, worn in a way that didn't line up with anything downstairs. "How long have you been here?" I asked, my voice quieter now. The child didn't answer straight away. Then slowly, "I don't know." Another pause. It gets hard to tell. A tight feeling pulled across my chest. "What about your mom?" I asked. "Do you remember her?" That got a reaction. Subtle, but there. "She comes to the door," the child said. "Sometimes. And she doesn't always look right," I swallowed. "What does that mean?" The child's gaze drifted slightly past me. Not at the wall, not at anything I could see. "She forgets things," they said, like how to stand or how to blink. A cold, crawling sensation crept up my spine. "And the others?" I asked, nodding faintly toward the shapes around them. For the first time, the child looked uncertain. "They don't talk," they said. "They just wait." "For what?" "They don't say." Silence settled again, heavy, uncomfortable. Then, a shift. Behind the child, one of the shapes moved, not like a person stepping, more like something folding slightly inward, then expanding again. My breath hitched. "Don't look at them," the child said quickly. Too late. I'd already seen it, and now I couldn't stop. Because once you notice movement like that, it becomes impossible to ignore. "Elliot," the child said again, more urgently this time. "Don't." Another shift. Closer now. The air around me seemed to tighten. The light dimmed slightly. Not enough to notice at first, but enough that the edges of the room began to blur. I took a step back instinctively, or tried to. My foot didn't move. My stomach dropped. I looked down. The floor wasn't holding me. Not properly. It felt like standing in something soft, something that didn't want to let go. "Okay," I said quickly, panic starting to creep in now. That's not happening." I forced my leg back. It came free. Barely, like pulling it out of thick mud. The child watched me carefully. "You're starting to stay," they said. The words hit harder than they should have. I'm not staying, I snapped. I'm leaving. We both are. Another step, closer to them. The shape shifted again. This time, more than one, slow, coordinated, like they'd noticed something, like they were reacting. The child's eyes widened slightly. Don't come closer, they said. Why? A pause. Because then they know you're real. Something inside me dropped completely. Too late. I was already moving because standing still wasn't an option anymore, and neither was turning back. Not when there was no door left to go through. Stay where you are, I said, reaching out slightly. I'm getting you out of here. The child didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't step back. They just stood there, waiting. And behind them, the shapes closed in. Not fast, not aggressively, just slowly, deliberately, like they'd been waiting for this moment all along. And I realized then, this wasn't a place you wandered into by accident. It was somewhere you were brought, somewhere you were kept. And if I didn't figure out how it worked, very quickly, I wasn't leaving either. I don't know how I got out of that room. That's the part that still doesn't sit right when I think back on it. One moment I was standing there, the floor shifting under me, those shapes closing in around the child, the air tightening like something was pulling it inward, and the next, I was on the ground, hard, flat, cold. The impact knocked the breath clean out of me. I gasped sharply, blinking up at a ceiling that actually looked like a ceiling. White paint, hairline cracks, a flickering strip light that buzzed faintly overhead. Normal. I pushed myself up slowly, my chest still tight, my head spinning slightly. The corridor. I was back in the corridor, the service corridor, the one behind reception. The door, the one that had vanished, was there again, closed, exactly where it should have been. For a second, I just stared at it. Then I lunged forward and grabbed the handle, wrenching it open. Inside, nothing. Just a narrow maintenance passage. Pipes, concrete, dust. No second room, no warped space, no child, no shapes, just empty. I stood there, breathing heavily, waiting for something to shift again. It didn't. I stepped back slowly, letting the door swing shut. No, I muttered under my breath. No, that didn't just... But it had. Because I could still feel it, that pressure, that wrongness. Like part of me hadn't fully come back with the rest of me. And the worst part, the child was gone again. I forced myself to move, not think, just move. Straight back to reception. The lobby lights were still on. The desk exactly as I'd left it. The ribbon still sitting where I'd placed it earlier. Everything normal. Everything wrong. I went straight for the phone, not the internal one this time. The main line. I picked it up, dialed the emergency number, and held it to my ear. It rang once, twice, then nothing. Not silence, a tone, low, continuous, like the line wasn't connecting properly. I frowned and pulled the receiver away slightly, then put it back. Same thing. I tried again, nothing. A slow, sinking feeling settled in my chest. No, I said quietly. No, that's not happening. I hung up and tried again. Same result. The line wouldn't connect. Not out, not to anyone. Like the hotel itself had just cut me off. I stared at the phone for a second, then slammed it down harder than I meant to. All right, I muttered. Fine. If I couldn't call out, then I needed someone else. Someone in the building. Someone who actually knew what was going on. Maureen. I grabbed the master key again and headed straight for the staff corridor, moving faster this time, not caring about the noise. Her office was just past the linen room. The light was on inside. That stopped me for a second, because I didn't remember leaving it on earlier. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Maureen, I called. It's Elliot. I need to speak to you, now. Silence. I didn't wait any longer. I pushed the door open. The office was empty. Chair pushed back slightly from the desk. Lamp on. Papers scattered in a way that didn't feel intentional, like someone had been interrupted. I stepped inside slowly. Maureen? I said again, quieter now. No response, just that same faint buzzing from the overhead light. Then, a sound. From behind me. I turned sharply. Gareth, the maintenance man, standing in the doorway. I hadn't heard him approach. At all. How long have you been here, he asked. His voice was low, careful, like he already knew the answer. Since, I started, then stopped. Doesn't matter. Something's wrong. He didn't move, didn't step inside, just stood there watching me. Yeah, he said quietly. It usually is by now. That answer hit harder than it should have. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. He didn't respond straight away. Instead, his eyes flicked past me, scanning the room briefly before settling back on my face. Then, "Did you answer it?" he asked. My stomach tightened. "Answer what?" He didn't blink. "The call." Silence. I stared at him. "How do you know about that?" Another pause. Then simply, "Because it always starts with that." Something cold settled in my chest. "Right," I said slowly. "Then you need to explain it, now." He exhaled through his nose, stepping inside finally and closing the door behind him. Not fully, just enough. Like he didn't want the corridor hearing. "You're not the first," he said, "and you won't be the last." "That doesn't help me," I snapped. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." He leaned against the desk slightly, arms crossed, like this was something he'd had to say before. "Rooms don't stay where they're supposed to," he continued. "Doors open to places they shouldn't. Phones ring from empty spaces. You start hearing things, then you start seeing them." "I've already seen them," I said. "That's the problem." His jaw tightened slightly. "Yeah," he said. "That's when it gets worse." I took a step closer. "There's a child," I said, "or something that looks like one, and there's a woman." "I know," he cut in quietly. That stopped me. "You know?" I repeated. He nodded once. "Been here longer than you," he said. "Seen enough to know what you're talking about." A long silence settled between us. Then I asked the question that had been building since this started. "What is it?" He hesitated. Not because he didn't want to answer, because he didn't have one. "Don't know," he said finally. "Not properly, but I know what it does." "And what's that?" Another pause. "Then it keeps what it takes." My chest tightened. "Takes what?" He looked at me properly then, not past me, not through me, at me. "People who answer," he said. Silence, heavy, final, followed. "That child was probably real once," he said. "Most of them are." "Most of them?" I repeated. He didn't respond. Didn't need to. The implication hung there anyway. Cold, unsettling, unavoidable. "And the woman?" I asked. His expression shifted slightly. Something darker. "She's been here longer than the rest," he said. "That's all I know." "Is she part of it?" I pressed. Another pause. Then carefully. "Or she's trying to stop it." That didn't make me feel better. Not even slightly. "Right," I said, running a hand through my hair. "Then we call the police. We get people in here. We shut the place down." "No." The word came sharp, immediate. I looked at him. "Why not?" "Because it won't matter," he said. "And because they won't find anything." "That's not good enough," I snapped. "There's a child missing." "There's always someone missing," he said quietly. That stopped me, completely. "They come," he continued. "They stay a night or two. Then something's off, a door left open, a voice heard, a call answered." My stomach dropped further with every word. "And then?" I asked. "They leave," he said. I frowned. "That's not—" "Or they don't," he added. Silence. I stared at him. "And the hotel?" I asked slowly. "They just ignore it?" His mouth twitched slightly. "Management changes," he said. "Stories don't." That explained Maureen, her tone, her refusal to acknowledge anything. She knew, or at least, she knew enough not to ask. I looked back toward the door, then at Gareth again. "So what am I supposed to do?" I asked. For the first time, he didn't have an answer straight away. He just watched me, then said, "Don't answer it again." A hollow feeling settled in my chest. Too late for that. Way too late. Because somewhere in the building, something had already noticed me, already spoken to me, already started, and judging by everything I'd just seen, it wasn't finished yet. I wish I'd listened to Gareth. Not just properly listened, but actually understood what he meant when he said it starts with the call. Because by the time he left the office, by the time I made it back to reception and tried to pretend I could still manage the rest of the night like a normal shift, it was already too late. The hotel had gone quiet again, that same unnatural quiet. Not peaceful, not restful, just empty, like something had pulled the sound out of it. Gareth had gone back to wherever he disappeared to during the night. Maintenance cupboard, boiler room, somewhere I didn't know. And I was left alone behind the desk again, staring at the ribbon, the phone, and the blinking cursor on the computer screen like they might give me answers if I waited long enough. They didn't. The clock ticked, slow, loud, every second stretching out longer than it should. I checked the time. 2:14 a.m. My stomach dropped. "No," I muttered. "That's not." But it was. The same time, the same point. Like something had reset, or looped, or was just waiting for me to notice. 2:15. I stood up. I wasn't staying behind the desk this time. No chance. If something was going to happen again, I wasn't going to sit there and wait for it. I grabbed the master key and moved out into the corridor, my footsteps echoing louder than I wanted them to. "Hello?" I called out. "If someone's there, just answer me, yeah?" No response. Of course not. Just that same low hum of the building. 216. I stopped near the center of the hallway. Listened. Nothing. Then, a sound, a feint. Ahead, a door. An opening, not closing. Just moving. Slowly, I turned toward it. Room 117. The handle was shifting, not sharply, not like someone trying to open it quickly. Slow, deliberate, turning a fraction, then stopping, then turning again. My chest tightened. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice sharper now. "If someone's inside, you need to stop that." No answer. The handle moved again. A little further this time, I took a step forward. Another. Then, behind me, a second sound. Another handle. I spun around. Room 114. Same thing. Slow, controlled, like something was testing it. Not trying to get out, trying to get in. My pulse spiked instantly. "No," I said under my breath. "No, no, no." I backed away slightly, my eyes flicking between the two doors. Then a third, further down the hall. Then a fourth. One by one, back handles, turning, pausing, turning again, all in that same slow, deliberate rhythm, like something moving through the corridor without ever being seen. My breathing picked up, sharp and uneven now. "This isn't happening," I said, louder this time. This is some kind of system fault, yeah? Doors glitching, locks, click. One of them stopped, completely. I froze. Room 117, the handle lowered fully, the latch gave, and the door opened, just a crack. Darkness inside, stillness. Then, a voice, from inside the room. "Elliot?" My chest tightened instantly. I knew that voice. The child. "They told me to wait here," they said softly. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay where I was, to not go closer, to not engage, but I couldn't. Not after everything. I stepped forward slowly. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Stay where you are, yeah?" "I'm coming." The other handle stopped moving, all at once. Silence dropped back into place, heavy, watching. I reached the door, paused, then pushed it open slightly. The room inside looked normal, too normal. Bed made, curtains drawn, soft lamplight in the corner. And there, standing beside the bed, was the child, exactly as before. Same face, same expression, same stillness. Relief hit me so suddenly it almost knocked the breath out of me. "All right," I said, stepping inside. "Okay, that's fine. Don't." The word cut through the room sharply. I froze. The child hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. The voice, it came from behind me. Close, too close. I turned slowly. The door was wider now. And in the gap she was standing there, the woman, closer than ever. No distance now, no shadow, just her, framed in the doorway, watching, her face still. Her eyes fixed directly on me this time, not the child, me. "You shouldn't keep interrupting," she said softly. My throat tightened. "What are you?" I asked. The question came out quieter than I meant it to, more uncertain, more afraid. She didn't answer, just tilted her head slightly, studying me, like I was the one that didn't belong. "You've already been warned," she said. "I'm not leaving them here," I snapped, the fear turning sharp again. "Whatever this is, whatever you're doing, it stops now." Then, a small smile. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough to make something twist in my chest. "You think you're taking them away," she said, "but you're just showing them new doors." That word again. Doors. My grip tightened slightly. "What does that mean?" I demanded. She didn't respond. Instead, she stepped back, out of the doorway, into the corridor. Slow, deliberate, inviting, and something in my chest shifted because I realized she wasn't trying to stop me. She wanted me to follow. I looked back at the child, still standing there, still watching, waiting. "What happens if I don't?" I asked quietly. The woman's voice drifted in from the hallway. "You already did." Silence. Then, the lights flickered, harder this time. The room dimming sharply, the edges of everything pulling inward again, that same pressure from before creeping back into the air. I took a step back instinctively. The floor dipped slightly under my foot. The child's gaze locked onto mine. "You need to choose," they said. My chest tightened. "Choose what?" A pause. Then, "Which door you're going to lose." And before I could respond, the handle behind me started to move slowly, turning. From the inside, the corridor behind me didn't collapse. It didn't slam shut or vanish all at once. It just tightened. Like something invisible was slowly pulling the space inward, reducing it, closing options without making a sound. The walls edged closer together, the turns behind me flattening into angles that didn't quite connect anymore. It wasn't a path back. It was being erased. I turned forward again quickly, my breathing uneven now. The door, the one with no handle, had opened further. Not wide, just enough to let something out. A line of darkness cut down the center, deeper than shadow, thicker somehow. And from inside it, I could feel that same pressure building again, heavier than before. Not just around me, through me, like it was pressing inward from every direction at once. "You need to move," I said, sharper now, stepping toward the child. "Now, away from that." They didn't listen, didn't even look at me. Their focus stayed fixed on the door. "She's coming," they said quietly. My chest tightened. Who? But I already knew. The temperature dropped, not gradually, instantly. That same unnatural cold flooding the space, dragging the air down with it. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. The light dimming again, not flickering, not failing, just weakening. And then, from behind the door, a sound. Not footsteps, not movement. Breathing, slow, measured, too close. Something shifted in the gap. A shape forming, not fully visible, not complete, but enough to make my brain try and fill in the rest. A figure, tall, still, and then a second shape, lower, closer to the floor. My stomach dropped. "No," I said under my breath. "No, that's not. They don't leave properly," the child said. I snapped my head toward them. "What?" "They try," they continued, their voice flat, detached. "But they don't go back the same way." A cold dread settled in deeper. "What are you talking about?" I asked. For the first time since I'd found them, they hesitated, just slightly, then said, "They don't go back at all." Silence, heavy, final. The shape in the doorway shifted again, stepping closer. Not out, but nearer, like it was testing the edge. My pulse spiked. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice lower now, tighter. "What's behind that door?" The child didn't answer straight away. They just looked at me, really looked this time. And something in their expression changed again. Not calm, not knowing. Something else, something closer to recognition. "You think it's just her," they said quietly. My chest tightened. "What do you mean, just her?" Another pause. "Then she's not the only one that answers." That hit harder than anything else, because it shifted everything. This wasn't just about the woman or the room or even the child. It was bigger, layered, something that repeated, something that built. And suddenly, Garrett's words came back to me. "It keeps what it takes." My stomach dropped further. "You said most of them were real once," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "What happens after that?" The child didn't respond, not directly. Instead, they glanced toward the shapes behind the door, then back at me. And that was enough, because I understood. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. They didn't disappear, changed, folded into whatever this place was. "Elliot," the child said again, softer now. "You shouldn't have come this far." I swallowed. "Bit late for that, isn't it?" A faint shift behind them, closer now. The shape in the doorway pressing further toward the opening, almost through. The air tightened sharply. My chest felt heavy, like breathing was becoming harder. "You still have a choice," the child said, that word again. "Choice." "Yeah?" I said, forcing something close to a bitter laugh. "Because it doesn't feel like it." They tilted their head. "You can leave." I froze. "What?" Another pause. "Then, but not with me." The words hit like a punch. "No," I said immediately. "No, that's not happening. I'm not leaving you here." "You already did," they said quietly. My chest tightened. "That's not." When you answered, they continued, cutting across me. "You came in." A slow, sinking feeling settled in. "And now," I asked. A pause. "Then, now you decide how much of you stays." The shape in the doorway moved again. Closer, almost through. I could see more of it now. Not clearly, not properly, but enough to know it wasn't just one thing. It shifted as it moved. Edges not holding, form not staying fixed. And behind it, more waiting, always waiting. My heart pounded harder, faster, too fast. I took a step back instinctively. The floor resisted, just slightly, like before, like it didn't want me to move freely anymore. "You feel that?" the child asked. I didn't answer, didn't need to. They nodded faintly. "That's how it starts." A cold wave rolled through me. "How what starts?" I demanded. Another pause. Then, "You staying?" The word landed heavy, final, unavoidable. Behind them, the shape pushed further through the opening, and this time I saw something that made my stomach drop completely. A face, or something trying to be one. Incomplete, unfinished, like it had been copied from memory, but not quite right. And for a split second, I thought I recognized it. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to make something inside me twist. "Do you see it?" the child asked. My throat tightened. "Yeah," a pause. Then quietly, "That's what they look like after." Silence fell again. Thick, unmoving. And in that moment, I finally understood something I hadn't wanted to before. This wasn't a place you escaped. It was a place that kept going. And the longer you stayed, the less of you left with you. The shape in the doorway leaned forward slightly, closer, almost through, and I realized I didn't have much time left to choose. The door opened wider. Not all at once, not violently, just further. Like something on the other side had decided it didn't need to rush anymore. The gap stretched, the edges of it pulling slightly out of place, like the shape of the doorway itself was struggling to hold together. The darkness inside wasn't flat anymore. It moved. Slow, uneven shifts, like something pressing forward from multiple directions at once. And the face, that unfinished, almost familiar face, it came closer. Close enough now that I could see the details that didn't fit, eyes that didn't align properly, skin that looked too smooth in some places and too stretched in others, a mouth that seemed to move slightly before the rest of it caught up, like it was remembering how to exist. My stomach dropped. "No," I said, stepping back. "No, you stay there." It didn't stop. Of course it didn't. Nothing in this place ever stopped when you told it to. "Elliot." I snapped my head toward the child. They hadn't moved, but their expression had changed again. Not calm, not distant, urgent. "You need to go." I shook my head immediately. "I'm not leaving you." "You don't get both," they said. The words landed hard, too hard. Behind them, the shape shifted again. Another one pressing through, then another, not stepping, not walking, just appearing closer, filling the space. My chest tightened. The air was heavier now, every breath harder than the last. "You said I had a choice," I said quickly. "So there's a way to get you out too." A pause, then the smallest shake of their head. "That's not how it works." Frustration flared, sharp and desperate. "Then explain it." They looked at me properly then, really looked. And for the first time, they looked like a child again, scared, just for a second. "They need one of us," they said. My chest tightened. "One of, what do you mean?" Another pause. "Then if you leave, they keep me." The words hit like a physical blow. "And if I don't?" I asked. The child's gaze flicked briefly toward the door, then back to me. "They take you instead." Silence, heavy, unavoidable. The shapes behind the door pushed closer, more of them now, edges overlapping, forms blending into each other in ways that didn't make sense. And that face, that almost face, it was nearly through. "You don't have time," the child said. I could feel it. That much was true. The pressure in the room was building fast now, the walls shifting, the floor pulling again, like everything was closing in on a single point. A decision. "No," I said, my voice tighter now. "No, there's another way. There has to be." "There isn't," they said. "You don't know that." "I do." The certainty in their voice hit harder than anything else, because they weren't guessing. They'd seen it before. "Other people," I said quickly. "You said there were others. What happened to them?" A pause. Then, "They tried to take someone with them." My chest tightened and another pause. Then quietly, "They didn't get out." That was it. That was the truth. Simple, brutal, final. Behind them, the doorway stretched wider again, the shapes pressing forward faster now. Not slow anymore, not patient. Hungry, I could feel it, that pull, that pressure. Something reaching for me, testing, waiting. "Elliot," the child said again, softer now. "You need to go." I shook my head. "I'm not leaving you here." "You already said that," they replied, "and I meant it." Silence. Then something changed. The floor shifted sharply beneath my feet, pulling inward toward the doorway. I stumbled slightly, catching myself against the wall. The air dropped again, colder, heavier, harder to breathe. "They're coming through," the child said. I looked up. They were right. The first shape had crossed the threshold. Not fully, not cleanly, but enough. Enough that it was here now, inside. And everything in me screamed that once it was fully through, that was it. No more choices, no more chances. Just stayed or taken. My chest tightened painfully. I looked at the child, then at the door, then back again. "No," I said again, quieter this time, more to myself than them. "There has to be." The child stepped forward. My breath caught. "What are you doing?" I asked quickly. They didn't answer, just moved closer, closer to me, away from the door. And as they did, the shapes behind them reacted. Sharp, immediate. The pressure spiked. The air thickened, like something had just been disrupted. "You can't take me," the child said quietly. I stared at them. "What?" "They won't let you," they added. Another step closer. "They need one that still belongs outside." The meaning hit instantly. Cold, heavy, final. "You," I said. They didn't respond, didn't need to. Behind them, the first shape fully emerged, and the moment it did, the corridor behind me, the one that had been closing, snapped back open, just enough, just wide enough. A way out. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Go," the child said. I didn't move. I couldn't. Not yet. "Elliot," they said again, louder this time. "Go." The shape lunged forward slightly, not fast, not fully, but enough to make the floor pull again, enough to make the air collapse inward, enough to make it clear this was it. This was the moment. I looked at them one last time, and for a split second, they looked normal again. Just a kid, standing there, alone. "I'm sorry," I said. Their expression didn't change, I know. And that was worse than anything else. I turned, ran, didn't think, didn't look back, just ran. The corridor shifted as I moved, the turns realigning just enough to guide me through, like something was letting me leave, but only because I'd already paid for it. Behind me, I heard it. A sound, not a scream, not a voice. Something else. Something that didn't belong to a person anymore. I didn't stop, didn't slow. Not until the floor beneath me flattened, the walls straightened, and I burst back into the service corridor, real, solid, normal. I stumbled forward, catching myself against the wall, my breath ragged, my chest burning. The door behind me, the one I'd come through, slid shut, silently, like it had never been open at all, and just like that, it was over, or at least, that part of it was. Because standing there, trying to catch my breath, I already knew something I couldn't ignore, something I wasn't going to be able to forget. I hadn't escaped. Not really. I'd just been let out, and whatever was behind that door still had what it needed. I don't remember how long I stayed in that corridor, leaning against the wall, breathing like I'd just run miles, trying to convince myself that I was actually back, that the walls weren't going to shift again, that the floor wasn't going to give way, that if I turned around, the door would still be a door. Eventually, I don't know how long after, I forced myself to move. Slowly, carefully. I walked back to reception. Everything was still there. Desk, lamp, clock, the ribbon, normal. Too normal. That was the problem now. Nothing looked wrong anymore. But I knew better. I walked behind the desk and just stood there, staring at the phone. It didn't ring. Of course it didn't. Not now. Not after everything. I let out a shaky breath and leaned forward, pressing both hands against the surface. "That's it then," I muttered quietly. "That's how it works." No answer, just silence. But I wasn't talking to anyone else anymore. I was piecing it together. Finally, because it wasn't random. None of it was. The call, the room, the doors, the child. It all fit in a way that made it worse, much worse. "You answer," I said under my breath. "That's how it starts." The words felt heavy. True. And once you answer, it knows you. I looked up at the ceiling, at the floors above, at the space where room 12 should have been. Except it wasn't just one room. That was the mistake. That was what I hadn't understood before. It wasn't fixed. It moved, shifted, connected to different places at different times, different doors, different people. "Not the same place every time," I whispered. The child had told me that, and they were right. Because it wasn't a room. It was a way in, a space between things, a place that didn't belong to the building, but used it. Used the doors, used the rooms, used the people. I swallowed hard. "And it needs someone to answer," I said, "to open it, to acknowledge it, to let it reach back." That was the key. That was why Gareth had said not to pick up the phone. That was why the woman had warned me. That was why the calls always came first, because once you answered, you were connected. And once you were connected, it could find you, move around you, pull you in. I looked back down at the desk, at the ribbon, still sitting there, cold, damp, real. "They don't leave properly," I said quietly, because that was the truth. They didn't disappear. They didn't escape. They stayed, changed, folded into whatever that place was. The shapes, the faces, the almost people. They weren't something new. They were what was left. "What they look like after," I whispered. My chest tightened again. And then another thought hit. Hard, fast. I straightened slightly. "No," I said out loud. "No, that's not all." Because there was something else, something I'd missed, something that didn't fit neatly into that explanation. The woman, she wasn't like the others. She didn't move like them. Didn't act like them. She spoke, warned, guided, but also led. She's not part of it, I said slowly. Or maybe not completely. I thought back to what Gareth had said. Or she's trying to stop it. I shook my head slightly. No, not stop it. Because if she was trying to stop it, why lead me deeper? Why bring me closer to that door? Why make me choose? Then it clicked. And when it did, something in my chest dropped. She's keeping it working, I said quietly. Not feeding it. Not exactly. Maintaining it. Controlling the way it takes, the way it chooses, the way it trades. My stomach twisted because that meant the child hadn't just been taken. They'd been left. She's been left, I repeated under my breath, the woman's words. And suddenly, it all made sense. In the worst possible way. It didn't just take people randomly. It needed something. A balance, one for one. You answer, you enter, you either stay or something else does. My grip tightened on the desk. Pop, that's why she said I moved the door, I realized. Because I had. By answering, by stepping in, I changed where it connected, where it opened, who it could reach. I closed my eyes briefly, and for a second, I saw it again. That face, that unfinished, shifting thing pushing through the doorway. And something about it, something in the shape of it, felt familiar. Too familiar. I opened my eyes quickly. No, I said under my breath. No, that's just... But the thought was already there, and it wasn't going away, because I'd seen it clearly for a moment. Just a moment, but enough. The shape, the outline, the way it moved, like it was trying to remember itself, like it had been something else before, something human, something recognizable. My chest tightened. Not yet, I whispered, because it hadn't been fully formed, not fully changed. But it was getting there, and I knew, without knowing how, what that meant. It wasn't just keeping what it takes, it was building, adding, layering. Every person who answered, every person who stayed, every person who didn't make it back. They became part of it, part of whatever was behind that door. And that door, it wasn't just one, it was everywhere. Every room, every corridor, every place where someone could answer. My breath slowed slightly, not because I felt better, because I felt certain. And that was worse, because certainty meant there was no easy way out, no simple explanation, no fix, just understanding. And once you understood, you couldn't pretend it wasn't real anymore. I looked at the phone again, still silent, still waiting. And for the first time since this started, I felt something different. Not panic, not confusion, something colder, something heavier, awareness. Because now I knew what it was, and more importantly, I knew what it wanted. And the worst part, I knew it wasn't finished with me, not even close, because I'd answered once, I'd stepped inside, I'd made the choice, even if I didn't realize it at the time. And things like that, they don't just let you walk away, they wait, they watch, they move the doors again, until eventually, you answer twice. I didn't finish that shift. Not properly. I stayed until morning because I didn't trust what would happen if I left before the sun came up. But I didn't do anything I was supposed to either. I didn't check the logs again, didn't answer the phone, didn't leave the desk unless I absolutely had to. And most importantly, I didn't look down the corridor, not once, because I knew if I looked, I might see something I couldn't ignore, or worse, something that could see me back. When the first bit of gray light finally started to creep through the front windows, it didn't feel like relief, just less pressure, like whatever had been moving through the place had stepped back slightly, not gone, just further away. Maureen came in just after 6, same as she had the day before, same coat, same expression, like nothing had changed, like nothing ever did. "You look tired," she said, setting her bag down behind the desk. I didn't answer straight away, just looked at her, really looked, trying to figure out how much she knew, trying to decide if she'd believe anything I said, or if she already had and just chose not to deal with it. "There's something wrong with this place," I said finally. She paused, just for a second, then continued taking off her coat. "It's an old building," she replied. "Things go wrong." "That's not what I mean." She sighed, like she'd heard this before. "Elliot." "There's a room," I cut in. "Upstairs. It moves. It connects to places it shouldn't. There's..." "I know." That stopped me completely. "You what?" She didn't look at me, just folded her coat neatly over the back of the chair. "I told you not to concern yourself with the upper floor," she said. "That's not the same thing," I snapped. "There's a child." Her hand paused, just slightly, then continued moving. "There isn't," she said. The same words as the man from the corridor. Flannel. I felt something twist in my chest. I saw them, I said. I spoke to them. They... And now you're tired, she cut in calmly. You've had a long night. It happens. That's not. If you're going to work here, she said, finally looking at me, you learn very quickly what is worth paying attention to and what isn't. Silence. I stared at her. You know, I said quietly. She didn't respond. Didn't deny it either. That was enough. People are disappearing, I said. You can't just... They check out, she replied. The answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. And if they don't, a pause. Then, they leave eventually. That same phrase, that same careful wording. I felt my stomach drop again. You're letting it happen, I said. Her expression didn't change. There are things, she said slowly, that existed long before you or I arrived here, long before this building was what it is now. That doesn't mean you ignore it. It means, she said, cutting across me slightly, you don't make it worse. My chest tightened. How is this not already worse? She held my gaze for a moment, then said, because it's contained. The word echoed in my head, contained, as if that made it acceptable, as if that made it manageable. As long as it stays here, she continued, it doesn't go looking elsewhere. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my chest. That's what you tell yourself, I asked. That's what I know, she replied. Silence fell between us again, heavy, uncomfortable, final. I looked at the desk, at the phone, still sitting there, still quiet, still waiting. I'm not staying, I said. She nodded. I didn't expect you to. That surprised me. You're just gonna let me walk out? Another small pause. Then you already have, she said. That didn't make sense, but I didn't ask, didn't want to. Because part of me already knew what she meant. I grabbed my bag, didn't say anything else, didn't look back. I just walked out of the hotel and into the cold morning air, the sea mist still hanging low over the road, the town slowly waking up like nothing had happened, like nothing ever did. I didn't go back, didn't answer any calls from them either. They left a few messages at first, about shifts, about cover, about misunderstandings, but I ignored all of it, packed my things, left Whitby the same week, told myself it was over, that I'd got out, that whatever that place was, it stayed there. For a while, I believed that. I went back to normal work, normal hours, normal places, anywhere that didn't have long corridors or old wiring or phones that rang in the middle of the night, and for a bit worked. Things settled, the memory faded, not completely, but enough that I could sleep again, enough that I could stop thinking about it every time I heard a floorboard creak or a door click in the distance. But then, a few months later, I was walking home late one night. Different city, different job, nothing like Whitby. Just a normal street, quiet, a few houses with lights on, nothing unusual. And as I passed one of them, I heard it. Faint, from inside, a phone ringing, not loud, not obvious, but enough that something in my chest tightened immediately. I slowed slightly, told myself it was nothing, just a house, just someone's phone, normal. But then, it stopped, mid-rent off, just like before. And for a second, I stood there, completely still, because I knew what came next. Nothing did. No voice, no movement, no door opening, just silence. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and shook my head slightly. Not happening, I muttered. Not again. I started walking, faster this time, trying to leave it behind, trying not to think about it, trying not to listen. But as I reached the end of the street, I heard something else, soft, close, from behind me. A voice, quiet, careful. Hello? My chest tightened instantly. I stopped, didn't turn, didn't move. Just stood there, because I recognized it. That same tone, that same hesitation, that same familiar fear. And slowly, very slowly, I realized something worse than anything I'd understood before. It hadn't stayed in that hotel. It hadn't been contained. It had just moved the door. And now, somewhere behind me, a phone was ringing again, waiting for someone to answer. If this story stirred something within you, be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere waiting for you to find it.